"You can't do this!" She screamed it so loud the screen door rattled, and for a second I thought honestly I'd set the place on fire. Then I looked at the paper in my hand and realized she really believed she owned my world. I'll say it straight, I came back to bury a man and inherit a secret. My grandfather William died 6 months before I quit my software job in Chicago and drove the pickup back down that long dirt driveway. I'd been away 20 years. The farmhouse sat where it always had, white paint flaking like old bone porch sagging a little to the north. But everything beyond the yard had been replanted into neat beige rows and matching mailboxes. Little signs said Maplewood Estates in polite green letters, and the smell of cut grass tried to convince me this was normal now. I carried the first box inside the screen door, whining the exact same rusty note it had when I was a kid. Dust motes hung in the light, and the kitchen table was buried in paper deeds, survey maps, letters. My head felt like cotton. I told myself I'd sort it all tomorrow. Then, as if the universe had rehearsed the moment, a white BMW rolled up my drive. She stepped out like she'd stepped off a stage, mid-40s, precise bob navy blazer, high heels that didn't belong on gravel. Clipboard in hand, badge flashed, voice calibrated to command. "Excuse me, this property is in violation of multiple community standards." "Community?" I said that word out loud like I was testing it. "This is my family's farm." She smiled sharp and small. "Your grandfather agreed to HOA oversight in 2018. Non-compliance can result in daily fines, liens, even foreclosure." She handed me a packet like I'd won a prize. "You have 72 hours to bring the property into compliance." 72 hours. $200 a day for paint. $100 for landscaping. $50 for visible agricultural equipment. $350 a day until I tidied the last dandelion to her liking. I stared at the map folded in that packet and felt my stomach drop. According to her lines, the HOA claimed 80% of what I'd thought was my family's land. The lines didn't make sense. I thought of my grandfather's voice measure twice before you let anyone move a stake, and something cold slid down my spine. I had forgotten a lot of things. Every morning after that, she showed up 7:30 on the dot, clipboard like armor. 2 men with cameras, a checklist that read like scripture. "Mr. Smith, I'm documenting 17 individual dandelions in your front yard." The meter kept running. I ripped the weeds out for 2 long days, and she came back with a citation for disturbed soil. The fines stacked like bad weather. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Susan, the old lady next door, nodded at me once, quick and private. "She's done this to everyone," she mouthed. "She told me the Andersons repainted their house twice because Karen declared the yellow too bright, $12,000 gone. People had been pushed out," she said, "not by law, but by slow, exact cruelty." That night I went down to the cold basement. Grandpa's handwriting labeled a box, "Property Records." Survey maps from the 1920s, tax records, letters to county officials, decades of holding a pen steady against things that wanted to erase him. The original 1924 survey showed 200 acres. Recent tax bills showed I'd been paying taxes on far more land than just the yard and farmhouse. My head spun. Was it possible? Had they built an entire development on Smith land? A name I trusted came through the phone: Margaret Foster, my grandfather's lawyer. "Your grandfather was strategic," she said, calm like a scalpel. "He said when you were ready, you'd remember what matters most." She wanted documents. She told me to document every interaction with Karen. "Don't let anyone intimidate you," she said. "You have more power than you realize." The twist hit me the next morning. Karen texted structural assessment of your barn Monday, demolition if it doesn't meet safety codes. She wanted to tear down the barn I learned to drive in, the one that smelled like oil in winter. Threatening to destroy that thing after I'd shown evidence after the tax records and surveys was not ignorance. It was escalation. So I called Robert Johnson. He was 85 and had watched the fields long before Meridian Properties and the salespeople turned up. He poured me sweet tea on his porch and told me what Grandpa had been doing for 20 years. Grandpa had let the development happen. On purpose. He wanted to see who would become neighbors who could be trusted with that land. He kept every permit, every improper fine, every misfiled paper. Then he handed me a key to a floor safe behind Grandpa's bedroom bookshelf and said, "When you're ready to stop being a victim and start being a Smith son, you'll know what to do." I slid open that safe and found the history of a slow patient plan, deeds, tax receipts, legal opinions from firms that had told Grandpa the law favored owners when structures are placed without consent. At midnight, I read a letter addressed to me in his careful script. He could have stopped them 20 years ago, he wrote, but he wanted to see what kind of people would grow here. Power shows character, he said. Use yours wisely. I slept on the floor with that letter under my cheek. When I woke, the answer was clear. I could fight Karen by letting lawyers have their way, nuclear option, eviction, and chaos, or I could try to save the people she'd been ruining. Margaret helped me prepare legal briefs, notices, lease proposals. We drafted 30-day notices to vacate for structures built on my land without authorization, and we drafted affordable ground leases for homeowners who wanted to legitimize their homes $50 a month instead of $400 in HOA fees, actual democratic governance instead of one woman's whim. Serving the notices felt like throwing a stone into a pond that had been roiled for a long time. Karen called me every name in a voice I'd heard only 3 times before, raw, terrified. She organized an emergency meeting in the community center. The irony wasn't lost on me. She planned to rally people in a building I just told her was on my land. That meeting was the climax. She stood at her podium, the navy blazer, the flag pin, spinning a story about me as a con artist. I set up a projector that showed the 1924 survey. I showed tax records, decades of payments that proved continuous ownership. The room changed around me. Shock, then questions. Someone asked why Grandpa hadn't stopped it. I told them what he told me. He wanted to see who would be neighbors. There was a pause so loud I could hear a baby breathing in the back. For 2 decades, my grandfather had documented abuse fines, threats, people pushed out when they couldn't pay. For 2 decades, one person had twisted community into power. Karen's face went white. She shifted from rage to bargaining. "What do you want?" she asked. I told her what I wanted: refund the fines, stop the harassment sign, reasonable leases if they wanted to stay. I wanted the community to survive without her regime. She grabbed my arm as I left and whispered, "Please don't destroy my life's work." I looked at her, then really looked and saw fear. Not the kind you give when you want people to obey. The kind that breaks you from the inside. She barricaded herself later that week, convinced of conspiracies, and was taken for mental health evaluation. I never wanted her broken. I wanted the system broken. But losing the person who had been the instrument of that system was a messy human thing. Once she was gone, the work of rebuilding began. People breathed, they hung laundry, they started block parties. We elected an interim board, set term limits, open budgets. The financial change was immediate. Families gained back hundreds a month. The human change was bigger. Neighbors talked without fear. Susan hung her laundry outside for the first time in 8 years. Kids played until dusk. Karen came back months later different. Jean sweater, no badge. She apologized slow and real. She said she'd lost perspective and let the job become who she was. I told her I never wanted her harmed, just accountable. She worked for it: therapy, restitution letters, checks to the Andersons and others who'd been hit the hardest. She volunteered to help during a water main break, but insisted she had no authority, just coordination. She stayed in the box she'd been given, and people noticed. Time does something strange. Repairs, small at first, add up. The community center filled with art classes and potlucks. The playground echoed with laughter that wasn't scored by fear. Property values rose. Crime dropped. That slap of vindication, call it karma if you like, wasn't a gloat. It was the relief of a place becoming a place again. A developer eventually came with money on a briefcase and renderings offering to lease some of the undeveloped land. I could have taken it and walked away. Instead, I brought the proposal to the community. We debated, we negotiated protections, we voted. 90% approved conditional negotiations. No one would be left behind. Karen, now in the role of community land steward, asked the best questions in the room about protecting vulnerable families, about shared benefit. That was the moment I knew the work had taken. My grandfather's last lesson wasn't about deeds or litigation. It was about patience and about the kind of power you want to leave behind. He left me land that remembered. He left me a test. Would I be the kind of neighbor who used power to punish, or the kind who used it to build? I tried to pick the second. If you sat where I sat, if someone had the authority to force hundreds of people out to prove a point, what would you do? Justice by eviction, or justice that forces change? Tell me which side you'd pick, and if you've ever had to stand up to someone who thought their title made them a ruler. I want to hear your story.